a time when the operation of the machine becomes so odious, makes you so sick at heart that you can't take part. You can't even passively take part. And you've got to put your bodies upon the gears and upon the wheels, upon the levers, upon all the apparatus, and you've got to make it stop. And you've got to indicate to the people who run it, to the people who own it, that unless you're free, the machine will be prevented from working at all.
Australia's best independent news and opinion radio show, The Daily Australian, with Nicola Charles and Jason Olbourne.
Hello, and we are back for the second half of 2025. That's right, it's July the 1st. The old financial year is over, and we look forward to what will become of us in 25, 26. Will we all become self-sufficient millionaires? Let's hope so. Let's hope that we go a lot further than that and it becomes a whole new world for us. Imagine being positive in these end times, or are they? So much more to talk about in today's show, episode 123 of The Daily Australian. I am Jason Olbourne, and I'm joined, as you can see right now, by the other half of The Daily Australian, Nicola Charles. Welcome back, and a happy Tuesday to you.
Happy Tuesday, Jason. Is this the right way? No, this is the right way. Pinch and a punch for the first of the month. There you go. All your bad luck is gone.
There it is. It's all over. How about that? Terrific. Well, we have had a brilliant, I don't think we could have asked for a better first half of the established in 2025, The Daily Australian, 122 editions, episodes in the can. And we look forward to the next 122 as our march to the end of this groundbreaking year. A quarter of a century gone already of the 21st. So many historic things happening in real time, and we will continue to talk about that as we go. Good news, bad news, other news, and different ways to see the world. It's pretty exciting when you think about it. I find it overall exciting, a little bit of nerves, but I just feel like that you've got to shake things up in order to get change. Things have been so much the status quo for so long. I'll take the change right now.
Yeah, absolutely. So with my metaphorical, because it's not actually there, tin foil under my hat, I will say I'm extremely suspicious because there's two adults and one older teenager in my house who for the last couple of days have struggled to sleep. And we've all woken up at 3:20 exactly, which I find a bit bizarre, very much bizarre. But again, when I can't sleep or I am forced to focus, I do research, and I've gone down enormous rabbit holes about Barry Soetoro, otherwise known as Barack Hussein Obama, and his links to the Muslim Brotherhood. The Muslim Brotherhood. He's had 2 meetings with them in the last 6 weeks. And one of those meetings, Jason, who was invited? The potential new mayor of New York. Watch this space. I'm going to continue looking into that.
Gosh, that's a big story, isn't it? So Obama, or Soetoro, is a very interesting character. If ever there was a candidate to be said Manchurian candidate, Obama is just one of those people. Like the rise from nowhere, the interesting story, that the Kenyan background, yet is brought up in Indonesia, looks distinctly like the Indonesian president, has a brother from Kenya that is probably his nemesis, his arch nemesis. Like if anyone is going to come out against Obama, it's that Kenyan brother. Of course, we've got the birth certificate. We've got the strange relationship. Michelle Obama coming out now and saying that childbirth doesn't define women. Interesting coming from Michelle, without a picture of childbirth anywhere, no pregnancy, etc. And of course, then we look at Crossfire Hurricane and the links there, and Trump going after Obama now, bringing out General Michael Flynn into the picture. I don't know if Obama is feeling as good as he might have a few years ago when he seemed to have the world at his feet and in the palm of his hand. And then, of course, there was the drowning of the chef at Martha's Vineyard, another story that doesn't quite add up. You must have your work cut out for you there. It's highly entertaining reading, I'm sure.
Well, there's just a lot of stuff, right, that when you put it all together like a jigsaw puzzle, proves to me that this particular individual is not at all who we thought he was. I mean, he went to a $90,000 a year school in Hawaii. There is evidence that his adopted father was really good friends and actually worked with George Bush. And of course, he sent billions of US dollars in cash in wooden crates to Iran, right? And he's in bed with the Muslim Brotherhood. So some sort of hideous coup d'etat. I mean, I think it's absolutely beyond question that Barack Obama is deep state.
Mm. And if deep state, or could you fine tune it a little more and just say CIA?
Yes, an asset. Or I don't consider him an asset. I consider him the opposite of an asset. I
A
consider
liability.
him, a liability. Exactly, Jason.
You know, years ago, I had a chance, and I think I've spoken about it before, to have lunch and a conversation with Bob Ellis purely by chance at a Labor Party state conference. And we talked about Obama, and he described him as the best orator of all time. And at the time, I was in largely in agreement. And I still maintain that Obama is a brilliant orator. He did give speeches that were as good as anything you'd ever seen. But isn't it interesting that Trump is not a good orator? And sometimes when they want to praise him, his detractors, they will say that he's a good orator, but there's absolutely no comparison between Obama and daylight, really. I don't know many people who could speak as well as Obama. I think maybe Vivek Ramaswamy was a good speaker. As good as RFK can be at speaking, his voice takes away from that. So you need to have the booming voice to go with what comes out of your mouth at the same time. But George W. Bush was probably about as bad as you could possibly get. Joe Biden, I don't think even counts. Kamala Harris, doesn't even rate on any Richter scale. So Obama was a standout on both sides of politics, certainly in our lifetimes even. I mean, Reagan was an actor. He could speak, but it was nowhere near in the league of Obama. You look at George H.W. Bush, Jimmy Carter. You're going back a long way. Maybe JFK was one of the great orators as well. But we're talking 60, 70 years ago, for goodness sake.
But to me, that smacks of highly schooled, highly trained, highly prepared. This isn't something you become exemplary at on your own. It's like anything, it's a craft. Public speaking is a craft. I mean, it's still considered the most terrifying thing anyone can ever do. I personally don't have a problem with public speaking because initially I thought it would be strange when I started doing in-person speeches. But I realized that, when you're online like this, you're speaking to a lot more people. By the way, I've started doing that thing that you showed the other day with Julie Inman Grant, where only 133 people tuned in. And I'm starting to look at a lot of other people's lives on YouTube, when they going live. And they don't do well. I don't know if they don't promote it properly or if they deliberately don't promote it so that they can sort of get a speech and get something on public record and then it's there sort of in perpetuity. But it's really interesting, and that sort of ties into this whole, story that broke today about the Kyle Sandilands Jackie O radio show, which, these people are getting paid like above 7 million a year to be voices on radio in Australia. They tried to syndicate them and, they're based in New South Wales and bring it down to Victoria. And Victorians are just not interested. I would hazard a guess, Jason, that more people watch our show or listen to our show than listen to them.
In Victoria, that would certainly make sense, wouldn't it? Because they are hemorrhaging advertising dollars. Their ratings are falling desperately, and we do have a little bit of detail on that particular story. I'll just see if I can dig it up for you now. Let's just find it here. It's quite detailed. I'll take that picture down. Look at that. There you go. Boo. Oh, for goodness sake. I can't even.
Yeah, no, it's awful. And I don't like the way, and you can never say this about our show. Jackie O is very much, the odd thing I've heard, very much a yes person to everything he says. And I just don't think that makes for good radio, whatever you're talking about. And of course, he heavily pushed the jabs. There's a lot of resentment there. I mean, don't bring a guy that heavily pushed jabs down to Victoria after what Victoria went through under Dan Andrews. It was who in their right mind up there thought that was a good idea, Jason?
No, absolutely. Well, look, their advertising share has fallen from 28% of metro ad revenue to 24%. So that is certainly significant. And their audience share in Victoria was 5.8%. It's now dipped to 5.1%. So that's a significant drop yet again in percentage terms. But when you're considering that in New South Wales, or at least the Sydney metro market, it was the dominant market and not being able to break in down there. So it just shows you that that there is a way. And of course, at that level of money, how much do you invest in it before you have to say, we can't go do this, we've got to try something else? Because at the end of the day, it's a commercial interest, isn't it? If you're not making money,
Yeah.
you can only support it for a certain amount of time before you got to let it go.
Well, let's just, I mean, I believe it's more, but let's just take that both of their salaries are 7 million a year each. So I think if someone gave me a contract for 7 million to do radio, I'd just do it for that 7 million for the rest of my life. Like that's an enormous amount of money, until retirement age. But, let's say 7 each together, that's 14 million annually that you have to make just to pay your on-air hosts, who aren't very good, in my humble opinion. Some people like them. I understand that. I guess if you're a tradie on a site and you just want to hear noise and people talking and you don't care what it's about. But if you're someone, as most people are now, who are really thinking about the strange things that are going on governmentally and politically and with health and everything else, and goodness sake, overseas wars, then you're going to need more than people who chat about who's who on reality TV shows, who's got a big bum, who kissed who, and who's going home with who. I mean, it's almost radio for children. I can't see many adults being fascinated by that over a long period of time.
Well, 45% of complaints made about the show were made about material not suitable for broadcast. So that is substantial. Pardon me. And one rival national radio host told Crikey that I think their show delegitimizes radio and it casts a dark shadow on the industry. It's unfunny, lowest common denominator content. Well, that's telling them, isn't it? So I don't really know what people find interesting. If there's anyone that is watching this show, can tell us in the comments what they have thought about Kyle and Jackie O. In the positive, what it is that they've liked about it. I don't assume there's going to be a whole lot of people that were once listening to that and now coming over here and are finding us better. But it would be interesting from anyone who's heard of anything that actually likes it. I don't know. I don't know. I don't find Kyle particularly interesting as a judge on those talent shows. And,
he does that as well. He's lucky we don't play his rap song telling people to get jabbed.
Yeah, well, absolutely. Maybe that'll be the new opener. We can call it satire or the Babylon B or C or D in terms of that. Yeah, just extraordinary. I lost a friend over that particular video clip itself.
No. Wow,
yeah,
really?
I was reaching out to somebody looking for an interview of someone that they knew, and they gave me that response as a way to brush me off right in the middle of COVID. And I thought, what an odd thing to say or to say to me. Yeah. He literally telling me that he was going to take his son to be jabbed on that day and couldn't talk. He was too busy. Well,
facts don't lie. Numbers don't lie. People are not listening. And when people stop listening, advertisers leave. Right? People are listening to this show. So advertisers, come one, come all. We have got people asking for rates and stuff like that. So, and what they're saying when they contact the show about advertising is, you're my kind of people. Right. And I think slowly, there'll sort of be more of these kind of people than people who like to listen to that kind of radio, Jason.
Yeah, no, exactly. Well, we had a really good campaign up until June 30 in terms of inviting people to become paid subscribers of the Daily Australian, and we had that great offer that ended at midnight last night. So what we've decided to do for July is do something a little bit different. We've had a lot of people reach out and say that they are foundational supporters, and a foundation support is a little bit different. It does mean that you are invited to make a larger contribution to the show, but in response, if you would like to, and you don't have to, but if you'd like to be a numbered foundational member, we would also include that as well, and that would mean that we would play a clip perhaps or along the crawl to acknowledge our foundation members as we go as part of that. So what that means is that this particular offer, we're offering this month 30% off a foundation plan. That is to become a numbered supporter. It was $350. We're going to say just $245 for the month month of July. That includes, obviously, subscription to as what you would get as a paid member, but you become a foundational supporter, somebody who can say, I helped create and build the Daily Australian. So if you want to be Daily Australian number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, those spots are open to you right now. And of course, you can still subscribe to an annual plan at $75, or you can become a monthly supporter at $7.50. So there's a couple of, well, 3 great options for you right there. So how about that, Nicola? A foundational member. It's pretty cool, isn't it? To think that that we're, a half a year into this venture and realizing that there is just a world at our feet in terms of what we can now do as independent media, and to be able to continue to bring facts to the surface, real opinions, and work on strategies to create change for us for the better here in Australia, watching here, and of course around the world.
I wonder how guilty like the foundational sponsors and advertisers of outfits like CNN are feeling right now, if they feel any guilt whatsoever, right? Because I think with mainstream media in particular, and I know in Australia, they're sort of foundational advertisers and sponsors, it's set up slightly differently. It's big pharmaceutical companies. And when you become a supporter of this show, you know for sure that you're not contributing to anything that would advertise anything like that. I mean, there's even a lot of freedom podcasts, Jason, and they are sort of selling pills and stuff. And I think your advertising is in direct opposition to what you're actually saying on the show. It doesn't make any sense.
It is odd, isn't it? But of course, people are looking for ways to be able to monetize and to be able to continue to do the work that they're doing. So it's
not that
perfect.
way. Don't do it that way. Yeah.
I know. And it's not perfect by any means, but at the very least that they're trying, but they will get better at what they're doing. So we think that the approach that we're taking at the moment is a really good way to do it. And when we have sponsorship, et cetera, down the track, then obviously we'll look at that as well. Now, there's a lot of news that we've got to get through today once again. I'd like to start with a very interesting clip, and I think it points to a former Prime Minister, Kevin Rudd, and him being on the nose with the Trump administration. I think it's worthwhile putting this in because the relationships count, but it's interesting how the media doesn't quite catch up with what's going on here, and they need to be told. But take a look.
Australia, I would say, feels like we're out in the cold a little bit at the moment. We're certainly not front of mind when it comes to the Trump administration. How would you view it? How do you think we should view it? We haven't got to the negotiating table when it comes to tariffs. The UK has. We weren't given warning about the bombing raid in Iran, and Australia has been side by side with the US for the last 100 years in every battle that they've fought. There's a review of AUKUS. How should we take that? Well, and there's no face-to-face meeting with Anthony Albanese. And one that we had was cancelled.
Donald Trump needs to find an Australian that he likes, or Australia needs to find an Australian that Donald Trump likes, and let that person take point, because so much with Donald Trump is personal relationships.
So do you think this is personal? He simply doesn't know Anthony Albanese, or he doesn't like him?
I think he doesn't like the current ambassador, and that's one of the biggest issues.
Really? Wow. So that ambassadorial role really matters when it comes to getting through those concrete walls
with certain people, with certain countries and certain people. But Donald Trump's a deal maker, and so you bring a deal, he's going to talk through it.
Rudd is seen as an expert on China. That is not front of mind for Trump at the moment. Do you think that might change when that situation changes or returns his attention there?
Well, it's a great opportunity to build relationships with our Congress, because that is the one issue that is bipartisan still in this Congress, which is anti-China.
Yeah, absolutely.
Rudd is the China expert, and then she agrees with him that they're anti-China. So that makes Rudd a real asset as being the US ambassador for Australia. It's just unbelievable, really, isn't it?
Well, it begs the question, Jason, why don't they get rid of him? Why is it? It's like this guy's on what do they call it? Tenure. This Rudd guy. Why can't we get rid of him? Right? Because the information that I was sent about him yesterday when that clip popped up was that Rudd is very much part of the old system, this deep state, this Obama side of things, and that he wants to keep going with that plan. And Trump's not interested in anyone who's willing to go along with that, because he's got less than 4 years to bring down what is probably a 100-year plan, piece by piece, starting by removing their income and defunding them. I mean, it's just extraordinary, right? This guy he's meant to be in a diplomatic role for Australia. And if the diplomacy with him isn't going to work, as that guy said, it's very simple. Find someone that can work.
You know, I'm just looking through a list of previous Australian US ambassadors, and I can't find another going back many years who was a former prime minister who took that role. So generally it might be an opposition leader, a former treasurer in Joe Hockey, chief of staff to John Howard, Arthur Sinodinos. But Kevin Rudd is the first former prime minister that I can see there that would take up such a role. And it really is an ego thing, isn't it, to think that you have to go from prime minister to US ambassador, like you're playing the role of statesman, being very important and within it all.
Well,
but when you listen to what Rudd has to say, there's not a whole lot coming out of his mouth in terms he seems to sit there and look and gaze over Albanese, whom he made his deputy PM when he returned as prime minister for 30 days. He's a real odd character, is Kevin Rudd.
Right.
And that's where I'm going here. He's just an odd bod trying to cling on for all time, but is a Malcolm Turnbull globalist. There's no other way to frame Kevin Rudd.
Well, it smacks to me of what was he involved in as PM that he wants to stay on in a pivotal role to help see through. That's what it says to me. He's not willing to let go of the plan, and he wants a role where he can hang around and sort of micromanage that for Australia. But I don't want him. I'm sure there's plenty of people that don't want him. And if the person he's supposed to have diplomatic relationships with doesn't want him, then, you know, in the words of Donald Trump, you're fired.
Absolutely. Well, when Rudd became prime minister, he talked about the Garneau report, which was all about creating a carbon trading scheme. And it was voted down, of course. It was voted down. And that gave rise to Clive Palmer becoming elected in 2013, I think it was, to fight against the minerals resource rent tax. That was another one that flopped. And Rudd also created the internet price watching on Fuel Watch and Grocery Watch. The Grocery Watch got destroyed by Tony Abbott as opposition leader. And of course, he was the first prime minister to come out and say that a computer was a tool and that every student would have access to a computer at school. So I guess he was pre-AI back in those days. So he thought he was getting ahead, but it was very basic. And in many areas, he was shown up for the amount of largesse and waste. But during the GFC of 2008, Rudd handed out the $900 checks that pretty much kept the country open at the time, to which Paul Keating said that alone was worthy of him being re-elected, which of course he really didn't do. He was replaced by Gillard for 3 years, and of course that's how they scraped in as a minority government. So Kevin Rudd was largely unsuccessful as a leader of the country, and yet ironically his biggest success was defeating John Howard in 2007, who actually ended up losing his own seat. But then Rudd was the great disappointment, and he just continues to do that. So it is certainly interesting with what's going on, and we'll wait to see if there is any result there in terms of meeting up with the Trump administration. Meantime, there's obviously.
Let me just say one thing. I think we've been wrong-headed about so much for so long. You know, like it's really important to unlearn a lot of things as well as learn new stuff. You mentioned there that he was pivotal in the idea of putting a computer or a tablet in the hands of every child. I used to think that was an admirable thing, you know, that you were making sure that children had tools to go into the workplace. I now see these devices, and we know historically and factually, to use as indoctrination tools, to expose children to pornography, to expose them to gambling advertising, which has been going on now for decades. And so though that may have been sold as a positive thing, again, that's quite a nefarious thing to get involved in for children.
Well, look, there's obviously many ways that you can educate and engage kids. And at the same time, we look ahead, 18 years later after Rudd becomes prime minister, and there are many kids that don't even handwrite anymore at school. Like, it's all typing. So it's a different story, and kids' ability to actually handwrite is well, it's somewhat lost. Is it necessary? That's an interesting question in itself. But you think it's a skill that still remains. It's not like you're teaching the kids Latin, a dead language. You still have to use a pen and you still have to write. So it is a slippery slope nonetheless.
These machines do cause brain atrophy, right? If it all becomes too easy, you don't need to look for an encyclopedia or find the facts yourself or go to a library or do your own research. You just need to ask AI, and AI is now treated like God. It's like got godlike power. If you're in a school and you're told this is the AI search engine and it tells you that climate change is real, then kids believe it's real. So all of these machines, they did and still do cause brain atrophy. So it was never a positive thing, not really.
I saw a comment, another one of these commenters that writes, ask Grok, and then, a question about something to try and debunk the statement. And it's kind of like some random keyboard warrior, he or she, without a real name and without a photograph, and thinks they're really clever, and then uses their hands and says, okay, brain servant, riddle me this. Show this clown why they're stupid. Meanwhile, I'm more stupid because I don't even know, but I'm going to press the stupid button that shows that I am stupid, and so are they. I just think it's hilarious. And one guy got called out finally for that. It doesn't make you look smart, mate, for writing Ask Grok. Why don't you say what you really think instead of going out there and expecting the AI to solve your problems for you? But that is brain atrophy in real time occurring right there.
Totally. Bad.
Now, Barnaby Joyce decided that he would speak up on Sunrise about AI and the dangers of. Tanya Plibersek didn't have a lot to say, but I'll play you that clip now. I think it's important to have a look at.
Yeah, Barnaby, do you think we have any idea what it's capable of? We've had the heads of AI companies resign because they are concerned what AI can do.
Oh, well, no, we don't, and because it thinks for itself. And for AI, you need also massive power, which we don't have because we've butchered our power grid. But even when it works onto other things like the brain-computer interface, we're right now in the Beijing, I see Tsinghua University, in the brain research, neurocyber and neurotech area. They're designing things such as a implant which goes under your skull but above your brain. It actually determines your thoughts, can actually read what your thoughts are. Others have a catheter, just goes up your carotid artery and can determine what your thoughts are. Another one is your sinal sagittal, basically up your nose, and it can determine your thoughts. Now, what that means is, if Sherva has an impure thought about Channel 7, so, shock to the genitalia, this is where the world is going. It is scary because mass-produce that and you can control a whole swathe of the population to their very thoughts, so they can't have a bad thought about you. And AI is yet another section because that's racing that technology ahead. Yeah. And so, it's a scary new world we live in, and we're not across it.
Yeah, it feels like it's slipping away. So we might have a more of a chat about that body that's looking into it.
No legislation to protect us, Jason. This is what I said when we spoke to Rennick months ago. We have no legislation. We're opening the door to this. And did you see Tanya Plibersek? She looked like she was saying in her head, shit, don't talk about that to the masses on the mainstream media, my God.
Yeah, I'm sure our friend Julie Inman-Grant will be able to work it out. Barnaby, what are you doing? Just leave it to the jig. The jig is up, Julian Inman-Grant. There you go. Well, look, it's another thing, isn't it? Interesting that Natalie Barr is now starting to say, well, maybe we need to look at this a bit further because they're starting to feel the pinch that they can't keep up. So good old self-interest. When the powers that be realise that it's a bit much for them, that's when they start to pay attention. Meantime, everyone else is meant to do what they say and not as they do, of course. Now, just keeping on that theme there, just on Julie Inman-Grant, I will bring this story up. I was going to hold it back, but I think now that I've mentioned it, it's just an interesting one. But I'm going to find the picture here. So a story's appeared where it says the Australian Censorship Commissar linked to a global anti-free speech ad cartel. And in it, this particular story from the Noticer And I'm just going to read a little bit off there for you just to give you some details. Australia's online censorship chief coordinated with a shadowy global advertising cartel that is accused of trying to silence Donald Trump, suppress lawful speech on social media, and organising Twitter boycotts. A new report from the US government's House Judiciary Committee on the Global Alliance for Responsible Media, or GARM, includes correspondence between Australia's controversial e-safety commissioner and GARM co-founder and initiative lead Robert Rakowitz. GARM is now defunct. It was established by the World Federation of Advertisers in 2019 as a flagship project of the World Economic Forum, and its members accounted for 90% of the world's advertising dollars. The interim report, released Friday, accuses GARM of colluding with regulators in Europe and Australia to pressure Twitter into complying with its censorship demands, distributing private information to member companies in order to spark Twitter boycotts, and pressuring social media companies into removing content despite knowing that its efforts were unwanted by American consumers. And what got worse there was that there was an email chain that was also released. I'm just going to put them up on screen. It's pretty hard to read them there, but it's just the language that is used is quite interesting, that these two people are communicating, and Inman Grant is all in on the idea of being able to see where they can get some sort of manipulation, and they're talking about how that they're going to manipulate and also using economic incentive and other ideas there. So this is a very interesting chapter in Australia and free speech and Article 19. There you go. Julie Inman Grant gets another mention on the Daily Australian.
Julie Inman Grant, let me say this to you, woman to woman. You want to be very careful what you're part of here, because the last group of people who decided that if they could control the media, they could control the masses, was a group of intelligence agents from the SS and the Nazi Party. So why on earth would you want to be part of anything where you were controlling the media and what the people could see, hear, watch, and post? And I'll tell you something. Julie Inman Grant, E-Safety Commissioner, she's definitely behind the fact that this show gets suppressed on my X account. My X account has nearly 300,000 followers. And if we're lucky, we pick up 15,000 views on X, Jason. So something's not right. Something is awry. And I feel it is something shaped rather like Julie Inman Grant.
Well, maybe we could use a headline that says "High Praise for Julie Inman Grant," and then have something in brackets at the end of it that twists it the other way, so you know what we're thinking about it in that regard. And maybe the algorithm or the AI or whatever it is going to pick it up and turn it one way or another. Well, it all comes down to what you're allowed to say and what you're not allowed to say. And I thought that this was really interesting, this story with Tucker Carlson. And that, of course, is in relation to RFK, and your tweet that you wrote, the CDC knowingly causing autism since 1999. They should probably get a plaque made up for their head office. Well, there you go, Julie. Maybe she reads the last line and not the first two lines, and then and gives your show a push there, Nicola. But maybe what we should do is play the clip specifically with what Nick sort of was referring to in the interview with Tucker and RFK. Take a look.
What you would do if you wanted to find the answer, which is to compare outcomes in a fully vaccinated group to health outcomes in an unvaccinated group. And CDC did that study in 1999. They brought in a team of scientists under a Belgian researcher named Thomas Verstraeten, and they looked at the data. They looked at children who had received the hepatitis vaccine within the first 30 days of life, and compared those children to children who had received the vaccine later or not at all. And they found an 135% elevated risk of autism among the vaccinated children. And it shocked them. They kept the study secret, and then they manipulated it through 5 different iterations to try to bury the link. And, we know how they did it. They got rid of all the older children, essentially, and just had younger children who were too young to be diagnosed. And they stratified the data, and they did a lot of other tricks. And all of those studies were the subject of that kind of trickery.
The CDC. They're literally now the Center for Disease Creation. How could you have allowed that to continue? All of this money pours into charities to help autistic children when they knew since 1999. That is 26 years of harm that they knew about, and they did it anyway. Why? Because they all got indemnified by the US government, all of these vaccine manufacturers. Otherwise, the vaccine industry would have disappeared if all of the harms coming from it were exposed. Absolutely disgraceful.
CDC, Centre for Denial of Crimes.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Look, we're hoping that Kennedy will be able to put forward his decision or his paper or his report that by September that he promised that would identify the cause of autism. And I tell you what, if he's saying what he just said there to Tucker Carlson and then it's not in that report that there is a link between the two, then you have to wonder what's really going on here. But that is a setup like you've never seen. Now, another interesting character in all of this was this particular person. I don't know how you can define Jacinda Ardern, Face the Music, but an open letter has appeared. I'm going to put it up on screen. It's quite lengthy there, and then I'll probably take it off to read it for you another way. But it was written to Jacinda Ardern, former New Zealand Prime Minister. You told the world that fear is not a leadership strategy. You told us to be kind. You told us we were all in this together, but we weren't. And we still aren't, Jacinda. There's a special kind of cruelty in standing before the world, projecting kindness, empathy, and sensitivity, all trademarked while leaving behind a trail of broken lives, broken families, and a broken country. You talk of compassion and connection on the global stage, while here in New Zealand, the damage from your rule still festers. Not in the headlines, not in press conferences, but in homes, hearts, and in hospital corridors every single day. You did not lead with kindness. You led with fear, intentionally, repeatedly, systemically, and you have the nerve to call it unity. You created a country of the included and the exiled, and you made sure the exiled knew exactly what they were, the wrong kind of Kiwi. You did not lead a team of 5 million. You broke it apart. This is your legacy while you travel the world, earning millions, telling curated tales of your empathetic leadership. The people who you harmed are still there, struggling to walk, work, heal, grieve. You cashed in. They're still paying, but it wasn't just a leadership failure. It was a moral collapse. Your government knew. You knew about the risks, the life-threatening reactions, the emergency safety signals. But instead of pausing, you doubled down. You pushed forward, not in the interest of public health, but of public or political optics. You needed compliance. You needed numbers. And so you silenced, mocked, and punished those who got hurt and those who stood in your way. Now your legacy is this: a whole demographic of New Zealanders, young and old, who feel a visceral reaction when they hear your voice. It's not just distaste, it's a physical, vomit-inducing recoil, a tightening in the chest, a sudden exit from the room. You're on stage or screen, smiling and polished, but to those who live through the fear, division and mandates you imposed, your voice is a trigger, a reminder of the gaslighting, coercion and trauma. Many have turned off the TV and stopped listening to the radio entirely, but you still appear uninvited on social media feeds, in interviews and articles. You won't just leave us alone. This isn't collateral damage and and it isn't unintended consequence. It is the inevitable result of cruel policies dressed up as compassion. You told us that being divided was being united, that staying silent was being kind, that following orders was being virtuous. You patted the public on the head like good little boys and girls, obedient to mummy's rules, and those who disagreed. We were the river of filth, the selfish, the granny killers, the scum. You gave permission to hate, and they grabbed it with both hands. We have not forgotten. And we're not going away. For more than 4 years, our inboxes have overflowed with heartbreaking stories of people cast out, cast down, cast aside. They are our fuel. They are the reason we wake up each morning determined to reclaim our country, its decency, its fairness, its courage, and its freedom. You may be celebrated abroad, but here at home, we remember the truth and we make you this promise: you will be held to account, if not by the institutions too timid to confront you, then by the people whose lives you tore apart. The truth will not remain buried, and your legacy will not be shaped by carefully curated speeches from elite stages, but the stories of ordinary Kiwis whose lives were broken under your watch. That's why we've launched the Face the Music campaign. It's time for answers. And now that you happen to be back in the country, you're doing everything we can to ensure that you're made to appear before the Royal Commission of Inquiry. You need to be questioned in public on the record about the decisions you made and the consequences we continue to endure. Anything less will be an insult to those still suffering We are patient, determined, and we have truth on our side. Signed, Alia Bland, co-founder Voices of Freedom and RCR for the Silence the Scarred and the Still Standing. Them's fighting words, Nicola.
Yeah, good luck with the Face the Music campaign. We need that in Australia, right? And I'm surprised people don't just draw the little moustache on her, just, you may as well, right? It's the same attitude to free people. I'll never forget, that was one of the most haunting videos I saw during the scamdemic, was her in a sort of cheap motel, and she seemed a bit tipsy. And she said, yeah, if you don't get the test, we're just going to keep you in a facility for longer. And when I heard the word facility, don't like the word facility anyway, but I was thinking, what right do you have to keep people in a facility for having a cold? A facility? What goes on there? And, now she's trying to erase it. You would think that these people would have the dignity, the Dan Andrews, the Jacinta Ardern, those characters, to go away with whatever pieces of silver they were given to betray their own people. And they would go away and live their lives quietly. But no, they can't go away. They can't give it up. They're addicted to it. And it's absolutely disgusting. And good luck to you. I wouldn't want to be one of these people. I wouldn't feel safe.
Absolutely. Well, leadership is something that was sadly lacking during that period where the hive-minded globalists came out and pushed it as hard as they possibly could. And now we're learning that, as we just saw with RFK and what he was working on there and exposing the CDC, well, here's another part, different leadership, but this is a big story and the magnitude of which in healthcare fraud in the US. I'll play you this clip. It is astonishing what's been discovered. Have a look.
In increasingly sophisticated and complex criminal schemes that defraud the American healthcare system. As part of this takedown, we've identified and charged defendants operating from Russia, Eastern Europe, Pakistan, and other foreign countries. These individuals have infiltrated our healthcare system to steal American taxpayer dollars. As just one example, we dismantled a scheme involving a sophisticated operation run from Russia and Eastern Europe that strategically bought dozens of medical supply companies in the United States and submitted more than $10 billion in fraudulent healthcare claims to Medicare. To make matters worse, these perpetrators used the stolen identities of more than 1 million Americans spanning all 50 states to perpetrate this scheme and submit these false claims.
But do you know why they did it? Do you know why these people from these countries did it? Because they knew it was coming. We didn't know it was coming. It was a surprise attack. That's how they were able to cash in, because so many people were involved in this conspiracy. It's absolutely disgusting. And I understand they want to hold all these people to account, but the internal stuff I find way more important, like the story we ran before about the CDC and them knowing about autism from the hepatitis B jab. So all of these people that they called conspiracy theorists, I remember Jenny McCarthy was concerned about her son because he had jabs at 2 and then just became autistic, and he was fine before. They destroyed their careers. They did it with mine. They did it with yours when we started talking about it on social media. I mean, we've been completely vindicated. Do you think we'll get an apology? Do you think we'll get employment with mainstream media? No, we'll get none of that, because they just move on. They just walk over you. They walk over you. They stand over you. They trample you like roadkill, and they don't care that you were right. And they don't care that they were part of the problem.
No, they certainly don't. And corporate welfare, which is kind of where you're going there in that story, is that everyone was allowed to grease their palms and go along to get along. But corporate welfare comes in all shapes and sizes, and this is one that should get most people quite upset. How is it that Bunnings, Australia's biggest retailer in terms of hardware and owned by Wesfarmers, gets a $100 million low-interest loan to install EV chargers and solar panels at both its Bunnings and Officeworks stores? $100 million of taxpayer funds there to subsidise interest. Why do they need that?
Well, I don't know why they need it, but I'll tell you how they got it. Because BlackRock have a controlling interest in Bunnings now. So there's that. So near me, not far from me, is a suburb in the southeast called Narra Warren. And we had right there on a massive traffic light junction next to the freeway, we had, like most suburbs have, an absolutely enormous Bunnings. And it was great. It had like a lumber yard and everything attached to it, and tradies used it all day, every day. What they did is they used a Chinese builder, and they built a new Bunnings next to the old Bunnings. And it's raised. You know the way the IKEAs are always raised up and the car park is underneath? Excuse me. So they've put this raised Bunnings in, and because it's raised, there's no lumber yard or anything anymore, not that I can see anyway. And I thought, this is a really strange design. So in the first week it opened, I went and had a look. What did I see? I didn't want to park in the car park because I get very nervous parking under big new buildings, in a car. So I parked over the street and walked across, and underneath, like a third of the car park is EV chargers, which of course have to be kept out of the rain. And it's just extraordinary to me. If those EV chargers ignite all that lithium, then, Bunnings is above. Insurance job.
Yeah, it's a handy one, isn't it? Well, corporate welfare of all things, but when Bunnings is getting
it, this is what's happening, Jason. Why pay for it when you can get the government to pay for it? It's the same with the NDIS story we did yesterday. The NDIS, our money, our tax dollars, are picking up the pieces, cleaning up the trash from Big Pharma because they were indemnified. So they were allowed to not only cause harm and be indemnified for it, they were allowed to profit. And now they don't need to use any of that profit to clean up the mess. Right. And so all of these super funds, all of these big businesses, when they want to succeed in Australia, they make sure our government money pays for it.
And of course, going along to get along and playing with trends lets you arrive at this story from realestate.com.au, where the headline reads, how the cities we live in are shaping our bodies and minds and property prices. Walkability, heat stress, urban sprawl. Welcome to the real reasons people are choosing where to live and why the smarter cities are the one that feel like a good party. Well, I don't understand that thinking there, but obviously
not a smart city. It's the smartest city. This isn't a smart city. This is the smartest city. And look, it's just going to be one long party, apparently. I don't know about that. I really don't know about living in a heavily electrified digital prison like that. But it's clever. It's clever the way they're starting to adjust it and put pictures of happy mums and kids at the traffic lights and all that kind of stuff. Everyone's walking, everyone's happy. I mean, I can't believe they're still pushing forward with this ideology, this extremist ideology, Jason. Most people are just saying, no, I don't want to live somewhere like that. And yet here it comes again from realestate.com. Very disappointing.
Wouldn't you think lockdown would, if anything, lockdown would have taught you is that I don't want to live in a city and I don't want to live in a building that has an elevator and I don't want to be confined to four walls and I certainly don't want to be up in the air.
The lockdown was your onboarding for your smart cities. You can see that now, right? Don't go
anywhere.
Who
would want that? After that point, wouldn't you be thinking, I want to get away from this structure. I want to get as far away from a city as possible. I want land all around me and I don't want to be trapped upstairs in a building and having to wait. I can't fathom that. I don't understand it. And yet it just seems to be a system and then that's the only choice available. So people go along with it. Look, there's just so many different directions that we can take in today's show. Maybe the next one that I'll bring up for you is just a little bit different, just to sort of take it away. This is a quick story. I'm just going to show you a video clip. Would you believe it that Space Force in the United States has met its recruitment targets 3 months early? Here's a short clip. I don't know about you, but Space Force
Yeah.
Well, it's going to be about security. It could be about future space travel. It could be about anything. But I tell you what, it just seems like the ultimate place that if you were looking for a real career and something and a real adventure, the old school glorification, if you will, of military service, Space Force is obviously attracting plenty of people's attention. And what a turnaround it's been, where they've been struggling to find recruits for other forms of military in the US. But there it is.
If you want
Meanwhile,
the truth about working for NASA and Space Force and those agencies, don't forget to watch the film, the dramatization I recommended a while ago. I think it was the 100th anniversary, called The Box, with Cameron Diaz. Her husband works for NASA, and a few nefarious things go on in their family. So do watch that if you're considering a career in that side of intelligence.
well, in other news, in the US, the president has criticised again Jerome Powell for holding up interest rates, obviously arguing for a cut there as the conditions suit said cut. And of course, it would help with being able to pay down or service America's national debt. But here is the press secretary, Caroline Leavitt, dealing with the situation.
The world. At the top is Switzerland. They're only paying a quarter for interest rates. Cambodia, Japan, Denmark, Thailand, Botswana, Barbados, Taiwan, Bulgaria, Cuba, Sweden, Morocco, Cabo Verde, South Korea, Algeria, Canada, Albania, Libya, Malaysia, China, New Zealand, Trinidad and Tobago, Czechia, Bolivia, Australia, Costa Rica, the Bahamas, Kuwait, Papua New Guinea, Bosnia, United Kingdom, and the UAE are all paying lower interest rates than the United States of America, which has one of the hottest and strongest economies in the world. The president sent this note to the Fed chair. It says, Jerome, you are as usual too late. You have cost the USA a fortune and continue to do so. You should lower the rate by a lot. Hundreds of billions of dollars are being lost, and there is no inflation. And the president is right. There is historically low inflation thanks to his policies, and we will continue.
Did we fact check that? Because I don't believe the rates are lower than Australia, higher than Australia. Australia's monumental, surely, compared to America.
Yeah, our official rate's 4.25, and theirs is higher. I understand.
Oh, really?
So yeah, we'll check that out as well. But that just shows you that Switzerland's down to 0.25% official rates.
Davos, mate, Davos.
Yeah, free money for everyone. Yeah. Again, powerful. Well, last week we mentioned that RFK, maybe it was even 2 weeks ago now, had changed his vaccine advisory panel, the board of 17, and I mentioned that Retsef Levy was one of the new people that was put onto the board. Well, at last week's meeting of the CDC's vaccine advisory panel was unlike any in recent memory, wrote Marianne Damasi. She said it was the first full session of the New Look Advisory Committee on Immunisation Practices, a panel now entirely picked by RFK, as we mentioned. Over 2 days, the committee tackled thorny topics such as COVID-19 vaccine safety, thimerosal in flu shots, preparations for future infectious disease threats. But it was a single vote on whether to recommend a newly approved product called Clesrovimab that split the committee. It's marketed by Enfloncia. It's not a vaccine. It's a long-acting monoclonal antibody designed to prevent severe RSV illness in newborns during their first RSV season. Now, the CDC had offered it to all infants under the age of 8 months whose mothers hadn't received an RSV vaccine late in pregnancy. 2 members of the panel, Dr. Retsef Levy and Vicky Pebsworth, voted no. And Retsef is no stranger to weighing risk. He's a professor at MIT and deep experience in data analytics and risk-based decision-making. He'd combed through 5 clinical trials of the RSVC monoclonals, including this particular drug and its predecessor. And what he found gave him pause that in every trial, more infant deaths occurred in the treatment groups than in the control arms. Levy acknowledged that the trials were small and not powered to detect statistical differences in mortality, but the consistency of the imbalance was difficult to ignore. Among the deaths were rare cases of gastroenteritis in otherwise healthy babies, events that defied easy explanations. So he saw things differently. He didn't feel that the FDA, CDC or Merck, the product's manufacturer, had adequately addressed the trial imbalances. The findings were statistically conclusive, but in Levy's view were too consistent to dismiss. Instead, what he did was advocate for a precautionary approach for an intervention aimed at healthy full-term newborns. And so he went on to have an interview with Damasi, and perhaps we might even one day be able to reach out again to him. But that is an interesting one. So it shows you that Kennedy has picked the right person to put on the board there, and immediately springs into action and makes a real difference.
A man with reason and accountability. Can you credit it? Like, seriously, how much do we need this? And we need more than one man. Was that enough to stop it because two people said no?
Well, it's enough to raise real questions as to what's going on there. The rest of the committee voted in favour of recommending the product. In the days following the meeting, the co-chair of the committee, Robert Malone, elaborated on his reason in a public post. He acknowledged the risks of RSV in infants are low, affecting 2 to 3%, but said most severe cases occurred in babies with no known risk factors. That makes it impossible to predict who will be hit the hardest. This may seem a small number unless your baby is one of them, Malone wrote. The risks of antibody product injections are much lower than the risk of your otherwise healthy baby being one of the unfortunate few that happens to develop severe RSV disease. To him, the broad recommendation was a pragmatic response to an unpredictable illness. With no way to know which infants might become critically ill, a single long-acting dose before RSV season offered a measure of protection. So that's the difference there. So,
fear from Robert Malone. I don't like that. That's disappointing. I understand a lot of people were attacking him on social media, and now I know why. Look, I'm a mother of 3, okay? And I just feel that, I think it's factual now, right? We reported on it earlier with the hepatitis B jab and the risks associated with that. I think humanity would be a hell of a lot healthier and happier if Big Pharma and all of these scientists just butted out. Now, I understand that some people will become sick and some people who become sick will die, but that's how nature is set up. It's set up like that in the animal world, and it's set up like that in the human world. And I don't believe for a second that governments give grants to people to keep everyone all alive all the time while they're busy doing business with a eugenicist like Bill Gates. It doesn't make sense.
Yes, and look, we've got some breaking news that's just coming through now, Australian news. A 26-year-old man has been hit with more than 70 charges after he allegedly abused 8 children at a Melbourne childcare centre. He's been named as Joshua Brown, aged 26, from Point Cook, has been charged with more than 70 offences, including sexual activity in the presence of a child under 16, sexual assault of a child under 16, and possessing child abuse material for use through a carriage service. Police are alleging the children targeted were aged between 5 months and 2 years. So there's a picture. There's a picture of the Victorian Premier there with a very sullen look on her face, and saying now that people are going to have to be tested, for goodness sake. This is absolutely disgusting. Further investigations are taking place at a second childcare centre in Essendon. Police allege the man worked at 20 childcare centres between January 2017 and May 2025. And now I just want to make comment on that. So if this person has worked in 20 childcare centres in that 8-year period, there's the problem right there.
Yeah.
You cannot transfer, and this idea of no admission, in other words, we're going to sack you or you resign, so okay, I'll resign and move to the next one. There has to be a warning bell for employers, particularly in this space, if somebody is hopping from centre to centre. This happened with that Queensland fellow that did these heinous crimes here. So there has to be something that must change in terms of this. Now, I know Senator Rennick is now out of office. He retired effectively yesterday, or at least is no longer a senator, but we're going to have to reach out, I think, in the first instance to the right members of parliament here to work on something in relation to warning signs, because the system of saying you have child protection checks, for example, and they say, oh, but
children.
Exactly. That is not enough, but there must be a warning sign. 20 jobs in 8 years, for goodness sake, that has got to be a warning, and we can't end up in a situation that it gets worse and worse and worse, that it doubles down like it did with this individual, 26 years old, and this horrific story.
Well, these are the childcare centres that Jacinta Allen goes on social media very excitedly to tell you that they're free. It's free childcare. Of course, there are caveats like you must be up to date with your shots. No jab, no play. This is the childcare that's free, is it? Childcare with people taking care of children who haven't been background checked. It's absolutely disgusting. And these stories never end. It's round and round, and something has to be done about it.
Well, indeed it does. And we have juries out in 2 jurisdictions, one in the Erin Patterson mushroom murder trial that we're expecting a verdict hopefully as soon as possible there. And of course, the Diddy deliberations have also begun in the United States, where 8 men and 4 women on the jury are now having to reach a verdict in his case.
They picked a jury with 8 men and 4 women, and he's an abuser of women. And it's 8 men and 4 women. Does that not seem suspicious to you? Shouldn't that be equal? That is appalling.
Well, you would think that, again, so the prosecution in this case would be the one that would be selecting the jury, and that prosecutor, Maureen Comey, their daughter of James Comey, former director of the FBI. But it's important to note at this point that Ghislaine Maxwell was also prosecuted by the same Maureen Comey and did receive some 20 years as a prison sentence there. So we watch on as we go. But I tell you what, just watching this, I cannot see how Diddy is not going to be found guilty on most or all of the charges, just from what we've heard in that story. I don't know how they can possibly find him not guilty, but yeah, we watch on just the same. But these stories just keep hitting the surface, don't they? They're front page stories now. That is a front page #1 story that I just read to you from Murdoch Media right now. They're not burying stories like that, and it is forcing our politicians to finally sit up and take notice.
Yeah, well, it's bread and circuses as well. I mean, if that guy doesn't get found guilty of a whole slew of crimes against women and men, from what I've seen, because he liked to dominate males, then none of us are safe, right? And we already know it's open slather on females in Australia, thanks to the government's immigration policy. I mean, and everyone will focus on this one now because it's a celebrity, and I hope he goes down for it. It sounds absolutely appalling. Too many people have come out now, right? I mean, it's people say, oh, no smoke without fire. There's a lot of smoke regarding that guy. But the thing is, he's not the only one in the music industry. He's not the only one in the film industry. I guess the other ones are just, laying low. Somebody actually emailed the show yesterday with a list of names of rebellious rock stars who told us they were anti-establishment, anti-government. And the person said to me, where are these guys? Where were these guys that we paid to listen to and watch on stage and idolize? Because they told us they were rebels. They told us they didn't take any shit from anyone. And what did they do during this time in history? Kept cashing the checks and kept their bloody mouths shut. So true, Jason.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, back on the US as we wrap up for today, just quickly, Trump has announced through executive order that he's providing for the revocation of Syrian sanctions. And some of the details there in red. This order supports United States national security and foreign policy goals by directing additional actions, including the removal of sanctions on Syria, the issuance of waivers that permit the relaxation of export controls and other restrictions on Syria, and other actions to be taken by the Secretary of State, the Secretary of Treasury and Commerce, as well as others by executive departments and agencies of the US without providing relief to ISIS or other terrorist organizations, human rights abusers, those linked to chemical weapons or proliferation-related activities, or other persons that threaten the peace, security, or stability of the US, Syria, and its neighbours. And that goes towards the Abraham Accords there. And of course, the next thing is that Trump is meeting Netanyahu in the Oval with a view to finally reaching a ceasefire in Gaza. So Trump, of course, the other day when he dropped his F-bomb and blaming Israel for misbehaving, if you will, after the fact with that rogue bomb, etc. So it'll be interesting to see if Trump gives Netanyahu the lesson. And of course, many people will still argue that Netanyahu is controlling Trump. And I think that the actions in Iran at that point have proven that that can't possibly be true. So we'll see how this one plays out as well.
My US insiders tell me that Trump did what felt like a stupid, pointless mini war, an offensive in Iran to stop Israel attacking them to stop the bombs. And that's why he was angry that as soon as he said to them, look, I've used all the bunker busters and there's no nuclear threat to Israel, Israel broke the ceasefire and continued to bomb anyway. So apparently that offensive was less to do with Iran and more to do with shutting down Netanyahu, which is interesting, right? Watch this space.
No, absolutely. Well, plenty of things happening around the world today, being July the 1st. A new range of government promises and laws, etc. Generally, it means that, as they used to say in the afternoon newspapers, budget out, beer cigs up. You can bet that the taxes will go up in areas that you're not meant to see, whilst they'll offer you a small rebate on your electricity. But at the same time, if you get a speeding ticket or a seatbelt ticket or something like that, it'll be more expensive. That's how it works. The toll at your local toll road would have gone up another few cents, of course, protected by CPI increases there. And of course, your superannuation does go up if you're an employee from 11.5% to 12% that your boss has to pay in. But if you've got more than $3 million, your tax goes from 15% to 30% on amounts above that. And the architect of superannuation in the country, former Labor Prime Minister Paul Keating, then Treasurer, when he designed it, has come out and criticised the Albanese government for the 30% tax rule, saying that kids today will all have worth more than $3 million in their super when they reach retirement, and so will have to pay that higher tax. And then commentators coming out and defending Albanese are arguing that whilst it's not indexed today, there's no reason in the future that it won't become indexed. Well, why not just say that up front? Why see how much you can get away with before you have to be forced to do something for the people that you serve? In other words, Albanese is putting his hand in the cookie jar, as he does. It's a Labor Party specialist item, and his own former Prime Minister, Paul Keating, is criticising him at that.
They want these kids in Australia to pay it forward, right? They want them to pay it forward, pay up before they even get it, with everything, with unrealised gains tax and the whole lot of it. And it's just devastating the young people in Australia. I wonder if, someone like Anthony Albanese will leave office and hold his head high and feel like he achieved something, or if he'll just scurry away to an island somewhere. I don't know how they sleep at night. I think, I mean, this is very personal, but I personally believe that Anthony Albanese is a nasty piece of work, and he can present as a friendly guy, as just a regular guy who grew up on welfare with a single mum. But I think he is nasty to the core. He never steps forward and says anything that would benefit Australians. And he's also not being transparent about, migration issues and his involvement with Bill Gates. He's had meetings with Bill Gates and we know nothing about it. So I'm highly suspicious of him. I think they are all sort of in stasis because of the Trump administration. So I'm hoping we get more than 3 or 4 years of mild peace, and that this country can right itself. And I know that's tied into the Constitution and everything else as well. But listen, mainstream media out there, you're responsible. And we've talked about the figures today, and the figures are going to be across the board for all of you, right? Including the 7 people that still watch the ABC News every day. If you don't start speaking truth to Australian people, they will switch off. They will become deaf to your media. They will come to media like this. And then what are you going to have to do? You're either going to have to negotiate with us, or you're going to have to mimic us. So sort yourselves out, because Australians' wick is that low right now.
Well, I'm wondering, when Albanese does retire, why don't we just make him the ambassador to China? He can live there as long as he wants.
Oh yeah.
Makes sense.
Bye-bye.
Yep.
Enjoy.
And maybe you can take Dan Andrews and Penny Wong along with him, and they can sit there and work for those guys. And interestingly,
well, if you like communism, Jason, if you like communism that much, don't try and change a whole country into a communist state. Go to a communist state. That would be your communist utopia.
It's perfect, isn't it? China's actually come out and said that it would be bad for Australia to increase its defence spending. So there you go.
Obviously.
That's a little bit of a hint that they would like Australia to be a little bit weaker rather than stronger. What does that imply as China is looking to, again, infiltrate under the radar here in Australia at a time when Kevin Rudd is not friends with Donald Trump, and we're looking to sort of solidify that relationship. And if anything, it's going the other way. So more changes coming. And more challenges, of course, but the more pressure that the Albanese government goes under, the more they'll be forced to create change. And it may well encourage the current opposition to start thinking a little bit outside the square and not wanting to go along to get along, Nicola.
They can dance around these issues all they want. They can use lawfare and legislation and e-safety commissioners and all the marketing people they want, and their state premiers, the unelected Jacinta Allen, who's really Dan Andrews in address doing his bidding. You can use all these people for all the mechanisms that you use all you want, but a day of reckoning will come when you will have to answer to the people. I know they're preparing for that day when it comes. I think they think Australians are just so completely passive and they will put up with this stuff forever. And I really don't think that they will. And I hope that this show is part of the movement that's waking Australians up. I know it is. So thank you again for watching The Daily Australian with myself, Nicola Charles, my co-host, Jason Olbourne. We will do this all over again tomorrow, hump day, halfway to the weekend. See you then.